even though you probably don't need much of an introduction, I'm going to do that anyway for anybody who maybe doesn't know the whole story. So after growing up in Anchorage, Alaska, Lael Wilcox started riding bikes in her 20s to get to work. This quickly became riding all over town and then across the country. After 7 years of traveling by bike all over the world, she started bike pack racing, setting records and winning races on Adventure Cycling's Great Divide Mountain Bike Route and the Trans-America Trail. She's been ultra racing around the world since 2015. For her, the most exciting aspect is that women can compete against the entire field and go for the overall win. Her favorite way to prepare for a race is to bike to the start. She'll often ride thousands of miles from home to get to a race. Lael is passionate about getting more women, girls, and people of all kinds out on bike adventures. She organizes a middle school girls mentorship program, women's adventure rallies, and women's adventure scholarships. Lael is also Adventure Cycling's newest board member, helping to guide the impact of our nonprofit programs. And this summer, she went after the Guinness World Record for circumnavigation, riding 18,125 miles around the globe over 108 days, 12 hours, and 12 minutes, beating the women's record of 124 days. So for Lael, no time on a bike is wasted. It's the best way to learn about the world, share meaningful time with others, and it's the most fun way to travel. And Adventure Cycling couldn't agree with you more. Thanks so much for being here, Lael.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Thanks for putting this together. It's so nice to see your faces again and talk about the ride. I finished about 5 weeks ago, and it feels like it was 10 years ago already. But it wasn't. It just happened. And amazingly, I'm still happy to be on my bike. I thought I'd be sick of it by now, but it's actually the most fun I have every day.
That's amazing. Yeah, you're not sick of being on the bike. You feel good still. At this last board meeting that we had at the end of September, you mentioned how this is maybe the best you've ever felt because you got to take care of yourself on this
Totally.
adventure. So I'm really glad to hear that you're feeling good. But okay, so first question first. Why this one? What was enticing about this challenge?
Oh, I've been thinking about this riding around the world, going after the record since the 2016. I was actually riding my bike from Alaska down to Astoria, Oregon for the Trans Am bike race. And during that ride, I thought, what if this Trans Am was the start of my ride around the world? And it seemed like such a big idea. I got a new passport, and that's it. And I didn't really get into it, but I thought, what a cool project. And it just, to me, it just seemed bigger than anything I'd ever done. And I've ridden more than this in my life, but I'd never kind of connected the dots in one set time, focusing on putting all these pieces together. So that was, I guess, 8 years ago, and it took me all that time to kind of circle back to it. And last year, I was riding my bike from home in Tucson, Arizona, up to Banff for the Tour Divide based on the Great Divide Mountain Bike Route. And I rode, I think, 4,000 miles just to get to the start. And it was all on paved roads. Actually, I was riding the Sierra Cascades Highway, or the ACA route. And I just loved all the climbs and loved being on the road and the simplicity of that. And that's when it really clicked, where I was like, next year, I'm going after the around the world record. So it scared me. I mean, not the riding itself, but just how kind of big the project was and how many puzzle pieces I'd have to fit together. And really, I mean, making a route in the first place that covered all of the rules for the record, which was a minimum of 18,000 miles, riding east or west. You have to cross two opposite sides of the globe. So that's, for me, Madrid, Spain, and Wellington, New Zealand. And you can't really zigzag or go backwards, and you have to take commercial travel in between. So once you finish a continent, you take a flight or a ferry to the next point, and the clock is continuous. So once you start, everything counts. Whether you're sleeping or buying food or getting on the airplane, it's all cumulative for the overall record. Um, and I mean, it just seemed like the greatest thing I could do, but also I was so kind of terrified for safety, getting hit by a car or having something go catastrophically wrong, breaking my bike or something like that. And I knew from the start that I was going to finish if I could, no matter what, no matter how long it took me. And in the end, everything kind of came together so I could do it, and nothing went horribly wrong. Of course, there were some setbacks, but I felt such a wave of relief that I got this kind of clean run on it, and I got to have so much fun out there.
It's amazing that nothing did go catastrophically wrong and that like everything went according to plan. And so, I mean, from the outside perspective, everything went according to plan. So I'm interested, like, how did you create your plan? You had all of these sort of rules outlining what you could do, but how did you create your route? What did you take into um, account and things like that?
I mean, so I knew I had to kind of cover my basics, but beyond that, I was like, well, this is going to be, at least 3.5 months of my life, and also the opportunity of a lifetime to piece together this big of a trip. So I thought, I really want the route to be, first of all, safe, and second, if it can be beautiful or interesting, let's add that. And then I thought, I am not a great route builder. Of a planner. I like the time on my bike. I like being out there, but I don't like the meticulous research that it requires to make a good route. I'm great at route building if I know the area, but of course I didn't know these areas. That was such a part of the trip. So I relied heavily on friends for help, people I trusted to do this work. So the US, the lower 48 was easy because I could rely on Adventure Cycling Association routes. And so I kind of, first of all, I had to pick a start and end point because that's part of the project too. You have to start and end in the same place. Ultimately honed in on starting in Chicago. It's where my wife grew up, and it's kind of in the middle of the country, so that seemed good. And then I was like, well, what ACA routes make sense? So that's when I came up with Chicago to New York, and then I'd fly to Europe from there. And then for Europe, I asked two of my good friends, Bea and Luca, that are Italians, to make this basically 5,000-mile route across Europe. And no mistakes in the route, beautiful, beautiful terrain. And I knew they knew what I like, which is basically climbing in the mountains. So they spent over 200 hours making a good route, starting in Porto, Portugal, and finishing in Tbilisi, Georgia. And I really didn't look much at it before I wrote it. I just thought, oh, this will be fine. I'll just wing it day to day. I'll figure out where I'm going to stay, find places to eat, and that kind of thing. And it was stunning. I mean, I got to ride through Portugal, Spain, France, and I asked him to put in like the major cities. So I went through Madrid and Paris and Amsterdam and basically all the capitals in the Balkans. I got to ride through the Alps, crossing Turkey to Georgia. So that all went really pretty well. And it was early June in Europe, just maybe the most stunning time of year to be there. So I really am grateful for all their hard work. From there, I flew to Perth, Australia, and I'd asked my friend Mitch Docker to build me a route across Australia. And Australia is more like Alaska, where there just aren't that many roads. So he put together a 5,000-mile route in about 2 days. What a difference. It's like a place that's so complicated like Europe versus Australia that has 22 million people in a country that's the size of the US. And I had never been there. And I flew in And since they're in the southern hemisphere, it was the dead of winter. And that was tough. You know, it got dark at about 5:30 at night. I saw hundreds of kangaroos and not very many people. And I spent, I think, 28 days crossing Australia. And at times I thought, I'm never going to get out of here. But it was a really cool experience, the brightest stars I've ever seen. And I saw them a lot because it was dark a lot. And the people were so kind when I did meet them, but it's such long distances between communities that I was out there alone for long stretches. But I flew from Brisbane, Australia to New Zealand, and it was my first time in that country too, also winter. 2 days before I got there, it was their biggest snowfall of the year. So everything was just covered in white. But since the storm had come through, once I was there, it was really cold. Like the mornings were about 19 degrees, but not stormy and not windy, which is very unusual for them. So I felt pretty lucky. And there I had a local Kiwi, Hannah Black, who's also a bike packer, route me up the South Island and then the North Island. So I had her help for that stretch. And then from New Zealand, I flew to Anchorage, Alaska, where I'm from, and then I had made my own route through Alaska and Canada, and I'd basically ridden all those roads before, so that part was really easy. I mean, really, if you ride from Alaska to the lower 48, it's probably about 5 turns. Navigation navigation is pretty simple. You know, it's like there are just a couple of roads and they're really, really stunning. I highly recommend anybody to bike tour there. But you almost don't need, you know, GPS or anything. And there's very little cell service, but it was back to summertime, so light until 11 at night. And I just felt like, oh, now I can do this. My confidence came back and I could push bigger days. And from Anchorage, I still had maybe 6,000 miles to get back to Chicago. So I mean, sometimes it felt like, oh my God, I'm never going to get there. You know, it's just such a long trip. Every day felt like this huge marathon, but also full of so much fun and excitement and beautiful places too. So I absolutely loved it.
That's amazing. So it kind of sounds like, um, winter in Australia and New Zealand was kind of maybe a hard section for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was probably the biggest challenge for me was how much time I spent in the dark, just because the days were so short, you know, and I was riding about 12 hours a day and then off the bike for 12 hours sleeping and eating and buying food and that kind of stuff. So I ended up riding, you know, in the dark basically every night. And I always got on kind of a later schedule too, you know, because I would set a destination of where I was trying to get to, and then I just ride till I made it there. And then I was pretty disciplined in sleeping 7 hours a night, just to not get sleep deprived, to stay safer on the road and feel better. So then sometimes that'd mean my start time would be a bit later and I'd miss a little bit of early morning daylight. So that was just how it kind of played out.
And that sounds maybe how you were able to stay fresh and recovered and from day to day. Is that the longest consecutive number of days you've been on a bicycle?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, but I think I had like 2 days fully off the bike, just because I had to fly. So that, you know, those were my rest days.
It's amazing. The plain rest days. Awesome. Okay, so moving on a little bit so that we can get to the public Q&A section. Um, so you were flying like 100, for me, I mean, seems for anybody really, 166 miles a day for 108 days, except for your flying days on average. But sometimes you were, going over 200 miles. How, like, but you still made time for people to stop and chat and ride with people and eat a donut here and there. And so, how, like, why was that important to you? Why did you make time for that?
Oh, this was a huge thing for me. So when I decided to do this, I added in this piece where anyone in the world could ride with me for any stretch of the route. And I don't know, this just seemed so cool because I was riding past, being on the road system, I was riding past so many communities and so many places. And so people got kind of involved with the route. And then the fact that they were invited to come, they mostly came on their bike. And that was another part of it too. I was like, I want to say hello. I want this to be social, but if you ride next to me, it's much easier for us to have a conversation so I don't have to stop. Um,
Yeah.
so people would ride towards me and then they'd flip around and ride next to me. And depending on where I was, some places like the Netherlands and Germany, it felt like a pop-up group ride because there were so many cyclists there, and it's like one group would join me for about 15 miles and then they'd go back home and then the next group would come in and people would come and say, oh, this is my daily commute to work, or you're passing my grandmother's house, or this is where I went to high school, sharing little pieces about where they lived and telling me about the culture and the place. And that just made the ride so much richer. People would come out with their kids. Sometimes they'd have them on cargo e-bikes. Sometimes they'd just be waiting on the side of the road in the dark. And the kids would have like drawn me a little picture that they gave to me. It was just so cool. Or people would come, in Australia and they'd say, you're going to see my sister in San Francisco. And then I would. Every time someone said, you'll see my daughter on the bike path in Albuquerque, sure enough, the daughter would be there.
Mm.
And it was like this little game of telephone, where I'm like saying hello to different family members. And I just thought the world is so connected. And if you invite people to come, they'll show up. And I don't know, it just added like an extra dimension to it. And sometimes it was harder, because I had to kind of emotionally be out there and be available and kind of keep my wits about me. But that's real life, and that seemed like such a special part of the trip to share it with other people, and for them to tell me what's special about where they live, or come out and have their biggest days on the bike ever. And that must have happened, at least 100 times, which is crazy. It's like most days, like somebody would come and they're like, they decided that day with me, they'd ride their biggest day ever. They'd stick with me the whole day,
Oh my
and
God.
I thought, oh, this is just the coolest. Like I've never, uh, I've never seen that before. And it also gave me so much kind of lifted my spirits of like people do want to take on challenges. Even if the weather's bad, they want to be out there. There's something valuable about doing this, about kind of getting out of your comfort zone and trying something new. And I just thought this is awesome. So yeah, it did in some ways kind of take a bit more time and a bit more energy, but I wouldn't have changed it. I think that's really what made my ride special. Because I'm very competitive and it was important to me to kind of do this in a competitive manner and break this record. But I thought if I can also add in this kind of social component, this human component, that's going to make the ride different and better for me. So I loved it.
That's amazing. I would say like everything that adventure cycling about is kind of held within what you just said. Like bicycle travel is all about the people you meet, getting to know the places and the culture and the nature, but it's also about the physical and mental challenge of doing
Mhm.
something outside of your comfort zone. And it's something that we believe in, we strive to help people achieve and connect them to. And so my next question kind of has to do with that, which is, so how did you initially hear about adventure cycling, and how have you like increased your involvement over time?
No, totally. I think actually the first time I really heard about adventure cycling was the Great Divide Route. And that's, this really well-known route from Canada to Mexico through the Rockies. And I think I started hearing about that like maybe 2010, 11, sometime in there. And this is crazy because when I heard about it, I thought I could never do that. It's maybe also why I'm so motivated to kind of share this with people, because now I think anybody could do that route. It's hard. Yeah, you're climbing mountain passes and it's on dirt roads, but if you have the motivation to do it, it's like it's available and it's fantastic. It's beautiful riding, great camping. You see such a special part of America, and it's totally worth it. So it's funny to kind of come back to that after, and now I've ridden it, I think, 5 times. But I remember that feeling of like, this is not something for me. I'm not strong enough. I'm not capable. And then I think the important part is to go after these things and start proving yourself wrong, realizing what you can do. And you don't have to immediately start riding the Great Divide route, but you go for an overnight, you go for a week on the bike, and you learn so much about what you do or don't need, what your preferences are, where you like to ride, how you like to take on kind of these adventures, if you like to sleep in a bed, if you like to sleep outside. I think personal experience is the way that we kind of grow the sport. So I heard about adventure cycling then, and then I ended up racing the Great Divide route in 2015. I toured some sections of it, I think the year before. And then the next year I raced the Trans Am, and that's the original Adventure Cycling Association route from Oregon to Virginia across the country. And I was just blown away with this story of 4,000 young people riding this in 1976 for the bike centennial. And I thought, what a dream that is. This is like before the internet. It's like, how do they coordinate all this? This is crazy. Paper maps and like 4,000 young people just going town to town, kind of spread out over the summer. But I thought, that is cool. And there's something about when you're riding a route and thinking about that history, that it just makes it so much more special, all the people that came before you and what their trips were like. And I could see that because it had been established in the 70s, these towns have a culture for it. They have like signs for like welcoming cyclists, providing free places to camp in city parks. And it's like really developed around the route. And I thought, that is really, really special. So I raced that, I finished, and then that summer was the 40th anniversary for Adventure Cycling Association and the Bike Centennial. And they asked me to come and be a speaker at this big party in Missoula. So that was really my first like genuine connection with ACA. So I came and did that. I got to meet so many of the riders that had been on that initial trip in 76. And I was just so impressed with, how this company was run and how much heart was put into it, that people really cared about maintaining these routes and encouraging other people to get out there. So been a huge fan since then. And then I'm so happy that I got to join the board this year. It's such a cool thing to be part of.
Absolutely. We're so excited to have you on the board. Um, our board is sort of the governance committee for the organization, and really, really helps get the word out about adventure cycling, lowercase and uppercase, really to get people on bikes, working to help guide the strategy around our nonprofit programming. And that includes our routes, our workshops, our experiences where we get people on bikes across the country, and so much more. And so I just kind of want to introduce that you have been doing this amazing little fundraiser for us. And if you want to talk about that, I'll throw the link here in the chat, so that people can check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Towards the end of my around the world ride, when I got back into the lower 48, I started a fundraiser for ACA. And this is just, I believe so much in this group and in the routes they're building and the culture they're making. And they really started, I guess, modern bike packing in America. And it's like the fundamental organization for that. And And often adventure cycling doesn't get credit for the routes or for all this framework that they've put into the sport. And it's a nonprofit. So I'm a member. I highly recommend anybody listening here becomes a member, checks out what they're doing, or donates money to the group so we can kind of keep doing this work. It really means a lot to me. In 2026, it'll be the 50th anniversary for adventure cycling. And, it's the reason that people are traveling long distance by bike in America, not only just from the history of it, but actively through the route development and maintenance. So this is huge. And I'm just so thrilled that I'm thrilled to be part of this group and to help with this work. And since, I put up this fundraiser, other people have taken off with it a bit. One guy made these really cool prints for my Around the World ride, and he's kind of doing a fundraiser for it there. I think Sean Small from Ruckus Composites is doing something as well. So, if you feel like you're excited about my ride or the work ACA is doing, please donate.
We're so thankful to everyone who's a supporter of adventure cycling. It's amazing. You are what sustains this work every day. Lael her goal is $20,000. She's halfway there. So let's see if we can get her across the finish line for this particular challenge.
Awesome.
Yeah, and there's a QR code on the screen if you want. There is a link in the chat. I'll probably put it in there again, but I would love to maybe transition to our public Q&A. Just a reminder to everybody, I have seen some questions come through the chat. If you can put those questions in the Q&A function of Zoom, that way we can separate some of the conversation from the actual I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. That happens all the time. So we can separate the chat from the actual questions. So please put your questions in the Q&A. I'm going to log over there and yeah, see what we can answer for Lael here.
So Jess, I'm just going to say quickly, the Q&A feature is new for us that we're using. And so we're going to be, there are 165 questions that have been submitted so far, and we will not have time, unfortunately, for all of them. So we're going to answer as many as we can with the time that we have left. Be sure to use the upvote feature. That's how we're answering with the questions that people want to have answers to most. We're going to start there and then work our way down. So upvote, please.
Awesome. Lael, do you want me to dive in and read you some of these most popular ones?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, cool. So Sherry asks, Lael, you inspire everyone around the world. Who inspires you?
Who inspires me? Oh gosh, actually, this was so huge for me. After I finished the ride, I saw that Billie Jean King had shared something about me on Instagram, and I almost passed out. She's my greatest sports hero because not only was she #1, but she revolutionized tennis and really women's sports in general. And I was but I missed it because I wasn't checking my phone. I was like, turn off the phone, I'm done. And then I looked later and saw she had shared something and I couldn't see it, but I thought, what an honor. And that to me was about as big as it gets. She's a living legend, and just to be part of that same movement to kind of uplift women's sports is really such a big goal for me.
That's amazing. Okay, so next one from Ben. How did you manage your recovery along the way?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for me was sleep. In most endurance racing, I kind of cut sleep to ride farther, but I knew that this ride was so long that having that sleep was going to be essential. And at first, I thought 6 hours would be enough, and I got about a week into Europe, and I was just feeling kind of crummy, like mouth kind of hurt, stomach kind of hurt. And I thought, what if I add an hour? Would that do it? And that totally changed everything. I'd felt fresh when I woke up and felt really good in the day. So that was kind of um, my compromise. And then beyond that, it was, trying to eat better than normal. So less gas station food, having a real breakfast and a real dinner every night that I could. That just made me feel a lot better. But besides that, I don't know, I didn't really do anything else, but I seemed more recovered on this ride than any of the shorter ones. And I went through a period in Australia. I'd eaten something bad in Turkey and my stomach was messed up for a couple weeks and I just wasn't at full power. And I had this feeling like, oh gosh, I miss feeling athletic. Because I was still pushing the pedals, making my distance, but I didn't have any of that kind of zest for riding. And I just thought, I really hope that this comes back. And then it did, and that's like the story of endurance is that generally things kind of turn around. If you're feeling kind of low, it usually gets better. It's hard to remember that in the moment, but it worked out.
That's awesome. This next question is one that adventure cycling gets constantly. How did you deal with dogs?
Oh yeah. Oh man, probably the worst dogs are in Georgia and Turkey. And they weren't Georgia, the country, and they
Yeah.
weren't like that bad, but they were like in packs of like 5 or 6, and they're like street dogs. But the thing I found out is their street dogs are they had like little chips on their ears, so it was like they had been like neutered, but they were just still around. And I don't think they really wanted to attack me, but they loved scaring me and ganging up on me. And I would notice because I'd see a dog and then I'd see it kind of slink behind a car. And then when I rode by, it'd pop out and I'd like almost jump off my bike seat. I'd start yelling and screaming, and but they weren't like really mean dogs. I think that's just how they had fun.
They're just a little bored.
Like, "Ah," and then I'm screaming my head off, losing my voice. Sometimes the locals would like kind of intervene. Like one guy came out with a broom and was like sweeping him off the road. Another guy in a car like kind of went between me and the dog, so I'd get like a little safe haven. But I think I realized like usually if dogs kind of started chasing me, I would just stop if I could, unless I'm like going down a steep hill and I'm going so fast, there's no way I'm going to stop. I just stop, and if I felt like they were really mean, I'd pick up a rock and like pretend to throw it. And usually that was enough, which is kind of sad that these dogs are used to people throwing stuff at them. I didn't actually throw it, but I just pretend, and that would get them to go. If I was going fast enough that I wasn't going to stop, I'd just sprint and try to get away. But I feel pretty fortunate that I didn't have any problems. And the places people most warned me about were like the Balkans, because there are some big sheep dogs, but I had no problems there at all. So it was okay. Dogs love to chase bikes. That's the world. I think they can hear you from really far away too.
Really?
Yeah.
They start
Even in the
coming
dark.
early.
Yeah.
Oh man. Um, so I don't know what's going on with my camera. I'm just going to turn it off real quick and turn it back on. So maybe I will be less blurry. But in the meantime, Tom asks, how about the toughest night? But just, I guess the question is really around like, what was your toughest night? Maybe what also was your toughest day that you experienced out there?
Yeah, I did this. So I was crossing from LA across the Mojave Desert. And this was, I guess, early September. And I had been so focused on riding the coast to LA that I was just thinking, I just have to get through LA. And I did. And I made it to Barstow, California. And it was like well over 100 degrees. But I was there in the evening, so it wasn't so bad. But that's already into the desert. And I looked at the forecast for the next day, and in Needles, California, it was a high of 111. And I was like, oh, I don't know about that. That's for me, it's like I live in Tucson, I'm pretty used to the heat, but spending all day out in temps above 100, I was like, I might get heat stroke or something. I don't know if I can stay hydrated through that. So I decided, I looked closely at the map and found like a motel in Ludlow, California, into the Mojave Desert, and it was 50 miles away. So in the cool hours of the morning, I rode to Ludlow, and then I stayed in a motel for until sunset at about 7:30, 8 o'clock. And then I decided, okay, I'm going to spend the next 24 hours riding through the Mojave Desert and then basically up to Flagstaff, Arizona, which is up at 7,000 feet. So I thought, oh, this will be good. Once I get up into the mountains, it won't be so hot. I'll be fine. And it was such a cool night. I left in the dark, but it was still over 100 degrees. I was just wearing like my cycling bibs and a reflective vest, and it was dark and hot, and I couldn't see anything except for my lights and traffic. And my friend Julie, who was one of my best friends in college, said, "Oh, I'll just come meet you down there." So she drove down from Salt Lake City, like 7 hours to Needles, and met me at a gas station at like 2 in the morning. And then we rode through the rest of the night together. And I hadn't seen her in a couple of years. I was like, this is like a weird dream. She's just hanging out outside the Chevron that was closed in the dark. And then we crossed the border into Arizona right at sunrise, and we could finally see what we'd been riding through. And it was absolutely stunning. It was so beautiful. And it was like the temps were then probably about 80. And so I actually got to enjoy it. And then Julie headed back. She was like, I just rode 111 miles, like the biggest ride she'd done in months. I don't know. And then I see this sign that's like wild burros neon flashing. And I was like, what? Is that real? And sure enough, there were all these wild burros just all over the road going into Oatman, Arizona. And it's like this kind of old Western town with like the, wooden storefronts, and the burros, the donkeys are just like part of their town. And they're all over the streets, and I think it's because people are like feeding them. I saw like these babies, and like a lady's feeding them a carrot out the window, which probably isn't great, but that's just what they do. But it was very surreal. And then the temps started really going up, and I had been in the dark riding like the shoulder of I-40. There was a closed road in the Mojave Desert that was like the Route 66 through there. So I had to detour and get on I-40, and it's covered in like exploded truck tires. So it's like all this exposed metal. So I had like multiple punctures on both tires. My tires are both really soft, but they're set up tubeless, so they're still holding some pressure. And I get to Kingman, Arizona, still in the desert, and there's a guy like waiting to greet me into his town. And he was
Oh.
like, "Hey, Lael, I've been waiting for you." And I was like, it's like over 100 degrees. I'm like fried with almost flat tires. I was like, "Hey." It's
Yeah.
like, I'm just gonna go straight to the bike shop. And he's like, "Oh, great. My friend has a bike shop, 2 blocks away." And I was like, "Really?" And he's like, "Yeah." And you just rode me over to this bike shop. I opened the door. It's like this tiny, like shipping container. And then there are 3 guys in there, and they're like, "We've been waiting for you all day."
They knew.
Not. Just saying that, but I must have
Oh.
looked like I just blew in from out of town, and then I was like, well, really, I just need some new tires. And so the shop owner, he was like, "Oh, no problem, I'll set you up right away." And then this old guy that was hanging out there was like, "How's your nutrition?" Because I told him what I was doing, and I was like, "It's okay." And then he went across the street, because there was like a juice bar, and got me like fresh squeezed beet juice. And he was like, "This will be good for you," like trying to give me some health food while the other guy's like fixing my flats. And I was so grateful. And then I roll out, and it was a monsoon. So the the skies opened up and just started like flooding me. Um, and then it stopped raining after probably like 10 minutes, but then the rain stopped and the headwind kicked up. And then it was a headwind for the rest of the day from like 2 in the afternoon until like 10 at night. And I'd already been riding completely. I rode like maybe 24, 26 hours. And I was like, oh God, this is a rough way to finish. But there were like beautiful sunflowers on each side of the road, like wild sunflowers, little ones. And I was like kind of out there. And then I see this like mom, dad, and tiny baby on the side of the road. And I was like, oh, they must be here to see the sunflowers. And they were there to cheer for me. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe anybody's out here. I haven't seen anybody in hours. So that was really, really sweet. And that night, I think I made it to Seligman, Arizona. So getting back up into the mountains, and I was like, all right, I'm set. I'm not going to be too hot anymore. And then, I get to my room, I take a shower, I recorded a podcast every night, and then I'd set an alarm for 7 hours and be like, okay, I got to get up and do it again. And this was probably like day 101 or something like that, and I was like, oh man, this is tough, but also so full of so many cool moments too, and that was like kind of a typical day, like hardship and then good stuff, and then I make it to wherever I'm sleeping, and then I get up and go for the next marathon day.
That's amazing because that day honestly sounds like a fever dream. Like
Yeah.
it could be just that day in and of itself could be a movie, which is amazing. Like love, love, love to hear about those specifics. And our next questions, like like maybe this is why I'm thinking of it that way, but Julie and 27 other people want to know, when is the movie coming out?
Oh, so my wife Rue is there shooting photos and video, and she's hoping to piece it together by the end of the year. So it'll probably be out in January or so, a 90-minute feature. And I'm so excited to see what she shot and to kind of remember it, because I probably remember 10% of the ride. So much of it is just like blasted away. So I'm really excited to see what she puts together. And my brother, James Wilcox, is doing original music for it. So, this is both Rue and I felt like this is like the capstone project for everything we've been working towards for the past 7 years together. So we're really, really excited about this one.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I'm sure everybody here, including myself, we're all very excited to watch it. So
Yeah, maybe I can do a screening in Missoula with Adventure Cycling.
that would be
That would be pretty fun.
fantastic.
I'm planning on doing just a handful of screenings before we launch it publicly on SRAM's YouTube channel. They were our primary sponsor for the project, so I'm super grateful for their help.
Amazing. Let's chat. Let's
Yeah.
definitely chat. Maybe Missoula, maybe Denver, maybe a few other places.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so maybe one or two questions more. We have some like technical questions. They're tied at the moment. So I'll just go with the one that's up top. What type of saddle did you use on your long, long ride?
Yeah, it's a specialized, I think it's called the Mirror or something like that. It's like a 3D printed saddle. And I mean, probably the craziest thing is I don't ride with the chamois, so no padding in my shorts. And I found, because I got into riding as a commuter, I never wore bike shorts, so I thought, why would I start? So I think the main thing was having like a somewhat squishy saddle, like a bit more comfortable, because a lot of the saddles are built around the bike pads. So this one has like a bit more flex. So that worked for me.
That's awesome. In terms of preparation, how do you prep for packing? Is there a template that you have that makes the packing easier? like for 1 week, I need this. For bigger something, I need this, or that kind of thing.
Every trip's a little bit different, but I think kind of break it down into like I need a sleep kit, I need clothing layers, I need my GPS and a way to charge my electronics, and then a minimal set of kind of bike repair tools. So that was kind of my setup for around the world. I had a sleeping pad, bivy, sleeping bag in the front, and then on the side pockets of the Aero bars, I just stuffed them full of food. So it was like sandwiches and cookies and burritos. I could fit like, 12 donuts in the side of one of those. And then I had rain pants, rain jacket. On my way to New Zealand, I bought a bunch of merino wool layers because it was so much colder. Um, what else? I had, mostly the tools are about keeping your, so I used super glue for the tire cuts because I was on road tubeless, so I just would kind of patch them with that. Multi-tool, derailleur hanger. So yeah, I think that was about it. But yeah, I just think about what am I going to need out there? How cold is it going to be? And then I am just really into packing as light as possible. But that totally changes if I'm going on a trip where I'm planning on sleeping more and sleeping outside more often. I'll bring a tent, just because you get better sleep. A bivy, I wouldn't recommend it. It's terrible. It's not a good luxurious sleep. In Arizona, I can get away with just bringing a bivy, but I rarely sleep in it. I just
Mm,
use it kind of as a ground cloth for my sleeping pad and sleeping bag. And then if the weather really went bad, then I'd get inside the bivy. But generally, it's just not that comfortable. Um, but yeah, I think every trip's you kind of tweak it for the conditions you're going to face, and then the more you do it, the more you realize what you do or don't need. And, usually when you're out there, you can figure it out.
yeah, definitely. All right. I think we have time for maybe one more question. Vlad asks, how many calories did you consume, excuse me, per day? Did you lose any weight or have any trouble getting enough calories?
Oh, I mean, that's a huge part of the job is eating. And I love eating, but the amount you have to eat to ride that far is kind of crazy. I don't know how many calories I ate a day. I I probably aim to get, 8,000. That's a lot. Um, People brought me like baked goods, so I ate a lot of those. But then I really like kind of savory food. So like in Italy, I ate pizza, and that was really good. Um, in Australia, I ate a lot of French fries, because at all the like truck stops, they had hot French fries, so that was good. Um, in the US, staying in motels on Route 66, they'd often have like the hotel breakfast, like make your own waffle, and I'd eat a waffle and a bagel and some eggs and some potatoes. So a lot of carbs. Um, but yeah, I think I tried to rely on real food as much as I could. When the weather, oh, I drank a ton of Coke. That was my number one thing I consumed out there. And sometimes I would be like riding and thinking, there is no way I'm gonna eat enough. Like I can't get enough calories. And that was usually like a signal to my brain, like just start eating now.
Mm,
Eat anything in your bags, just eat whatever you have, find something to eat, and then go from there. Because you can't think like that. You can't think this is never gonna work. You have to think, just start the process, see how it goes. In the heat, don't bring chocolate bars. They melt. A good hot weather candy bar is a payday. Super salty, super high calorie. I'm like an expert at the gas station.
I bet I have no doubt about that. One of the questions that we always ask new staff when they first start, we have this little like ritual of asking them questions, and somebody likes to ask, all right, you're on a trip, you're at a gas station, what do you go for? And so it sounds like payday might need to be added to the list.
Pretty good.
Awesome. I have 198 questions that we have not answered. Is that insane or what? That's
That is
amazing.
incredible. Oh, this is so cool. The participation is so good, and there's so many people that are just excited about bike travel. So I'm just pumped. I'm so thrilled. Can't believe this came together like this.
I know, I know. Seems like maybe we should do a few more. Get some of these other questions answered. Thank you so much, Lael. It's fantastic having you here. It's fantastic having you on the board. Thank you so much for having a fundraiser. Halfway to our goal for that fundraiser. Let's see how much further we can get. I'll grab that link one more time. Lael fundraise, lael.fundraise.org. It's also on your website and on your social media as well. Yeah, anything else you'd like to say before we?
Oh, this is awesome. And we will have some in-person events for the launch of the video. So I hope that I can meet some more of you in person. And thanks so much for being here. This is a lot of fun.
We're excited to have it. Thank you so much, everybody. Really appreciate you being here. And thanks so much to
Awesome.
Lael and Hayden. Thank you too. Okay.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody. Hope to see you soon.